Can you name some controversial women's issues?
Controversial women's issues. The wage gap, the pink tax.
Controversial women issues such as like abortion, the housing, rent, equal rights, things like that.
Roe versus Wade that was overturned. Women have a right to their body.
Can you name any men's issues?
Yeah, men's issues are that men have no, I can't. Like men have quite a bit.
Men's health is really a big issue right now. It seems like we're in a time that it's hard for men to talk about their mental and physical well-being without being ridiculed or demonized.
A lot of men don't really talk about what's going on like in their minds, really, and that leads to like more suicides within men and stuff like that.
I would say like their ability to be emotionally vulnerable.
Why do women say they want men to show their emotions, yet they say they want macho, masculine men?
I think there's a fine line between both of them. I think that we want that security, but certain women want that security, but they also want them to be able to communicate and be open with them.
I think women are confused in a lot of ways because they say they want these things. Like, for instance, women say they want a nice guy, but when they get a nice guy, they leave him. I think it's one of those assholes finish first.
Nice guys finish last.
Yep.
Men being on child support is kind of like a big issue in the world today.
When it comes to custody, when it comes to child support, which I believe is complete theft.
Men's issues, I would say that they typically have to deal more with run-ins with the police or like being judged and things like that.
That you have to have a certain amount of funds. You have to be a certain caliber of a man, like for people to actually respect you.
Who is more empathetic, men or women, and why?
I think women are more empathetic because they are the ones that has to deal with the baby 9 months. And the men are just there to be like kind of like support.
Personally, I would say women, we kind of naturally have that within us. It can be knocked out, but we have to care. Our body, like our biological nature is to care.
I would say men are more empathetic because men have to understand women to navigate the relationship, whereas women have this preconceived notion about how a relationship would be, how men are supposed to provide. So they do not give men the leeway to be at fault, have faults, make mistakes, as men give women.
I think men are constantly told to like toughen up or be a man or like you're not allowed to cry, whereas like women aren't. Women are allotted the opportunity to be emotional, and so I think if we socialize boys to feel their emotions more often, then they would be more comfortable with being empathetic.
Women say they want men to be more emotional. How are today's men more emotional than they've ever been, yet men are struggling more than they ever have?
Plain and simply, too many women raising men. They said, I don't need a man to help me raise my child. I can do this on my own. Then you raised a bunch of feminine-ass men, and as a result of having feminine-ass men, now you have sensitive men and insensitive women who grew up in those insensitive homes because they never got to see their mother being vulnerable. All they saw was their mother being the hard-nosed.
Is the problem that men don't express their emotions, or is the problem that people don't listen when men do express their emotions?
Most of the problem is that people do not listen when men express their emotions, especially in their relationships with their partner. Women want a sensitive and emotional, intelligent man, but yet when a man expresses his feelings and emotions, they look down upon him and ridicule him.
Why are we more concerned with men showing their emotions than we're concerned with what men are actually being emotional about?
That is an interesting question. I do not have an answer for that right now.
Maybe we should focus on that because I think that's pretty damn important.
Yes, that's...
If a little boy cries out for help, everybody's going to pay attention to that. If a little girl cries out for help, it's going to be the equal of attention. But when we get adults, it seems like you just have to be tough as a man. But that same little boy that's crying out for help is inside that man. You get what I'm saying?
If men say they want to talk about men's rights, How many women are willing to hear that?
About 2%.
So then can we conclude that women don't really care about men's feelings?
If we're talking stereotypically, I would say that is correct.
I don't think that's a fair conclusion because of the power struggle that we go through, but I think that both parties could be more willing to listen. I think the frustration comes when women are trying to talk about women's issues and then men are like, well, what about men? When they didn't even bring the conversation up.
Doesn't the opposite happen? When men talk about men's issues, women say, what about women?
Personally, I've never had a man bring it up on his own. It only ever comes up when a woman's talking about issues she faces.
Why do men get so much resistance from other men when talking about men's rights?
Men have this competitive nature, this ego macho, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, don't show your express emotions. So men ridicules other men for being emotionally intelligent or in touch with their feelings. They call them simps.
Why is it more socially acceptable for women to hate men than it is for men to hate women?
I don't think that is acceptable for either.
Because women have always been oppressed versus men have always been on the top, so it's kind of like misogynistic. Misogynism is not as accepted as like trashing men.
Because men have the power.
Do all men have the power or just a few men at the top of the food chain?
It doesn't matter. They still have the power struggle.
Aren't the majority of homeless people men?
Probably, but again, we all suffer under the same patriarchy.
We've lived in a world of a patriarchal society, so it's always better for the oppressed to talk about the oppressor than the oppressor to talk about the oppressed. And since men have been the oppressor for a millennium, that is basically why women can talk about men and when men cannot talk about women.
Do women get shamed, canceled, and silenced when they say bad things about men?
Not really, not normally.
Do women get shamed, canceled, and silenced when they say bad things about men?
No, depending on who they're talking to. Are they talking to women or men? I think it goes both ways.
Why is it when women misbehave, we blame social media, but when men misbehave, we hold them accountable?
Our previous president, Trump, literally said, grab women by the pussy, and he was able to run again for office. I don't think we hold men accountable. That's a crazy statement.
If we consider that the mainstream media, social media, TV, newspapers are all owned by powerful men, the real patriarchy of this world, who is giving women so much airtime and platform to challenge the patriarchy?
Weak motherfucking men. Weak men.
Why are women able to organize women's marches, but men can't organize men's marches?
That's not true. We had one in 95 called the Million Man March, and it was organized and it was successful, and it was clean, and it was organized, no fights, and it was 2 million men there. So I don't believe that's true.
Why don't men lobby Congress like women do?
That's a good question. I think because nowadays, even with Donald Trump and Biden, I think women and everybody else in this world wants to see a woman in power.
On YouTube, you can't say words like and How can we attempt to solve problems when we have to use terms like corn, grape, and self-delete when discussing men's issues?
Well, it's hard to fix any issue if you can't talk about it, if you can't be honest about it. Just like race or inequity, gender inequity, class inequity, if you cannot talk about the issue, it's hard to solve the problem. So,
well, what's the purpose of having language if we're unable to use certain words?
That's a great question. I mean, we can't. The freedom of speech isn't really a thing. You're not allowed to speak your mind anymore. You're not allowed to do that, and they're breaking their own law.
Well, how can free speech and censorship coexist?
I don't know. Everything is very monetized now. Everything is very, it's like freedom of speech, but not online anymore.
People that police language and culture are usually women. So men will not, will not tell on other men based on their language. But if you say something foul against a woman, you're going to get reported,
I think that we need to stop being so sensitive about words, because if this word is in the dictionary and has its definition, somebody uses it, they just use it. I don't think that we need to like go around it. We need to face it head on.
Why do the men who fought for their freedom of speech have the least amount of it?
Because we're men and we're meant to stay silent and work.
Why don't men lobby Congress like women do?
Too busy working.
Are men less likely to lobby Congress because they're too busy working and afraid to get canceled?
I would say so, 100%.
Could it also be that men are afraid of speaking up as part of their defined masculinity?
Yes.
Can you explain that?
That's exactly what I was saying earlier. Like, you know, a woman wants a man to
shut up and take it like a man.
Shut up and take it, but also they want them to protect them, right? They could say all these things about men all they want, but if shit hits the fan, who are they going to look at?
Men have an image of what masculinity is, and that's strong and unimpenetrable, like nothing can affect you. Then, you know, you wouldn't want to show that side because it diminishes that image. But when actuality, in my belief, is part of your strength. Because once you cut off that emotional side from you, you're cutting off a side of yourself.
Why are men forbidden to represent women's issues, but when we talk about men's issues, it's either represented by women or only the rich alpha men, never the average men?
Because the rich alpha men have platforms, for one. Two, men can talk about women's issues if they're considerate and knowledgeable about the issue. Most of the time, men don't talk about women's issues because they don't have an idea what they're talking about.
And I think women are good advocates for everyone in their communities because we're used to advocating. And I think that a lot of insecure men and I think a lot of incel men, like that whole genre, is very scared to admit that they're insecure.
But on the same time, you have these quote unquote alpha males who think that want to relegate us back to an area of male superiority or a patriarchal society, I would say.
It all comes back to being silenced, right? I mean, whenever a man will speak up about any issues they have or issues that are going on in the world, they automatically get silenced unless they're a big name, like you were saying, Andrew Tate earlier, who actually is getting reprimanded for the things that he has been saying about women.
The government is all about controlling and devaluing the man so that it can step in and be every woman's daddy. They basically trying to be everybody, be the top pimp.
Why do women talk about equal representation, but when they get it, they go and push men out of being represented? Is that equal?
I don't think that that's true because most areas of representation are majority men, even though women are the majority of the population in the world.
A lot of the issues that I bring up on this channel are often met with responses like, it goes both ways. If it does go both ways, why do women dominate the mainstream media when talking about women's issues, while men's issues are forced to remain online?
Because, first of all, the mainstream media is a business, and women buy more products and listen to more talk shows. That's why they have more representation on TV.
Because that's what the mainstream media wants now. They want control, right? And they know that they can get control by pushing more towards women being able to basically say whatever they want to say whenever they want to say it. I mean, you look at every news channel, you look at everything now, everyone's listening to whatever the news says, right? So, I mean, that's another reason, too, why that men and women just, unfortunately, aren't equal anymore.
If men have been speaking up about their issues for decades, why has nothing improved, but in fact only gotten worse?
Because men have been the oppressor and not the oppressed. So equilibrium would means that it would feel like they're losing rights instead of gaining rights, when actually everything is just becoming more balanced.
Because women speak about this stuff. This ain't nothing new. Like, women been talking to each other and having meetings and book classes and all these things. They always sit together and have a conversation about what they're going through. If men getting together, they're not going to talk about that. They're going to try to take their mind off of it. So let's go drink and let's go party and let's go watch this sports game. But we don't speak on what the issue is. I think that if we have more time with men coming together speaking on it, then it'll be better.
I think you have two sides competing with each other, and I think you have like the OG men who think that the new generation of men are sissies and they kind of look down on them and don't support them, and then I think you have them getting embarrassed or shy or rethinking their decision to speak out about these things because of that pressure.